Welcome to the Industry Born podcast. I'm Cullen, your host, and today we'll be covering almost anything related to cannabis. Well, Nathan, listen, it's a pleasure to meet you, and I know it's virtual, but I wanted to say welcome to Industry Born podcast, and it's just a conversation. I was kind of fascinated by reading your bio, actually, what I got off of LinkedIn, and then I had to go and look up bioinformatics because I was really unfamiliar. Honestly, the information I got was pretty generic. Kind of just describe it in a layman's terms or as lightweight as you can what bioinformatics is, because you're actually a PhD.
Yes, I actually do. I have a bachelor's, master's, and PhD. Two of them are in biology, and one of them is in bioinformatics. So, long story short, I attempted a first PhD before getting my final PhD. Is how that turned about. We can get that story later if that's interested. But answering your question about bioinformatics, so bioinformatics can be described in a simple manner that you have domain knowledge, you have data that is biologically relevant. This can be the same for almost any other domain that's out there, banking, engineering, you name it. There's going to be certain domain knowledge that's necessary to do there. And then pairing that with computer science background, so AI, machine learning, analyzing all this data is where the bioinformatics side comes in. And the reason why that's so necessary to have a whole degree focused just on that interaction is the amount of data that you get in biological species or even yourself is quite astronomical. You can have files that are 3 to 10 gigabytes a piece from sequencing data for one person or for one cell or for one instance. And so imagine having an experiment with 80 different samples. You could have a terabyte of data to analyze, which you literally cannot open that file.
Right.
And so, how do you understand that data? How do you figure that out? Is where the bioinformatics component is really,
And
really
so, and
important.
you're talking about like the basic DNA lettering, right? We're talking about raw data. We're talking about ones and zeros almost.
Yeah, it can be DNA, it can be RNA, it can be proteins, it can be metabolite data. And bioinformatics, what we call it is omics, is what we call
Okay.
it. And what that term describes is just the different layers of biology in terms of how that data. So, metabolomics, transcriptomics, genomics, all these different terms that are called omics essentially just means that we're able to quantify thousands to millions of variables on one level of biology. And combining all that together is what makes bioinformatics, in my opinion, really fun and super interesting to see the
It
world like
it
that.
looks like I programmed for a minute, like, and then you run it through a compiler and you look at it and you're like, what in the hell am I looking at? But you know, uh, but you're going, we are the compiled version of the code, and the plants are the same thing,
Yeah.
compiled version of the code, and you're kind of going back and going, okay, what do these little ones and zeros mean, and how do they fit, and what's important, and what do I want to avoid or get rid of, and stuff like that.
That's right. So, taking cannabis for example, you look at a plant and you look at different ways you can use it. So, you want to grow it for fiber, you want to grow it for biodiesel, you want to grow it for CBD, THC, you name it. In my world, in my view, I look at that as zeros and ones. It's like I look at that as input and output. So the plant is producing something. There is a cause and correlation effect on how that happens. And so then you need to analyze a lot of data to understand how those nuances work. How does that genotype versus that environment work? How does the grower grow those plants versus the genetics you get from your
That's
plants? Because all those are
right.
nuances.
Well, I mean, okay, so we've done this for, I don't know how many, ever since humans have been around cultivating plants. We've kind of been doing this blindly, right? We've been looking at the compiled finished product, the plant, or the dog that we want to have more dogs that look like that dog, kind of thing. We've been doing this. We know how to do this externally, but we're actually talking about, well, we can be more specific and maybe get to the end result quicker if we go up a level and we can actually get into that code and actually evaluate based on the code right? And then potentially manipulate the code. I mean,
Absolutely. So, like for example, we have testing that tells you what the gender of the plant is at day one. So you pop that seed, you pop that leaves. I can tell you if it's
ah
male or
man,
female. Then,
no way.
oh
That's
yeah,
crazy.
we validated it in Costa Rica
Really?
and across the United States. Yeah, it's and that's just in my view that's something simple because it's simply looking for male certain regions, and since that's a pretty big phenotype, pretty big trait,
Okay.
it's pretty important and pretty not easy, but it's more straightforward to find that relationship.
So,
But trying to get into like nuances of making bigger leaves or smaller leaves is a little
right.
harder. Or CBD, THC amounts, or ratios of those are even
Okay.
harder. And so you have different degrees of difficulty depending on the complexity of the phenotype or of
And
the
there's so much. I
output.
mean, there's so much variance. There's so much data, like you said. But not only that. I
Exactly.
mean, even in the even in guys when guys go, oh, I've got this, and this is a result of back cross, cross cross, back cross, and you're like, and then they go, this is my formula for getting it. That guy that retries to do that, he's gonna get close, but he's not gonna get 100%. You're
Absolutely.
gonna end up, because you didn't start with exactly the same full data set. Um, as the other guy did, right? And in cannabis, we do have a lot of misnamed uh, plants hanging
Yes.
out there. This is
That's made it difficult when I came into the industry because I was like, what's all this candy type names? It's like I don't understand.
yeah,
Like, give me an ID for your plant and then I can work with that. I don't need all those different
right,
names
right.
because you don't know what that means.
Right, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Well, here you are. This is how we deal with it.
Yeah.
Actually, I remember when I got into the industry early, we would make names up, kind of, because you have something, you don't have a name for it, and you bought it from somebody else. You're like, oh,
All
we're gonna
right.
call it this, and that obviously has been refined, obviously, and now you have people who are very serious about genetics. Not that they weren't before, but we're actually seeing people get very, very serious about genetics, and I think it's interesting. Brands will call out their genetics and say this is, a big famous brand will be like, all of our people who grow are going to grow this genetic, right? And so they ship that out, and everybody does that, but um, it's not pure. I can't imagine. I mean, it's cloned, a lot of clone stuff, so it's really consistent. But clones aren't even exactly identical. Is that correct, or am I incorrect there?
Well, I would unpack that on two levels actually. So the reason why people use clones is because of the variability and the inconsistency of breeding. You do a clone because you find this beautiful phenotype from this one plant, and you want to do it over and over
Right.
again. Well, you're gonna throw the dice again. You're gonna do a random bet if you try to cross that plant
Yeah.
again, and so therefore, an easy solution is let's just clone the thing. Let's clone 100 different mothers from that same one, and just that becomes our population that we just keep pulling from. The reason, though, that clones will never be ever completely sufficient is that while they're clones, as you age, as a plant ages, as you age, your DNA is not going to stay the same. It's not static. It's going to be always
So
dynamic.
it's kind of,
There is actually a really nice study, a paper published a couple of years ago that literally sequenced the top, the middle, and the bottom of a mother plant and asked the question, how much sequence mutations are there from the different tops? And they noticed quite a bit of variation. I think, if I remember my numbers right, close to 30%
wow.
variation from one plant. And that's
That's
one
one
plant.
plant. And so, I mean,
Out.
so
Yeah,
over time, you're going to get
yeah,
drift, right? And that's what,
exactly. That's
and
exactly right. It's called genetic drift.
that's really, that's crazy.
It's actually called
Yeah,
genetic drift.
is that right? That makes sense. But that's crazy because I think about, you think about, longevity and all these kind of things, but to know that, we are breaking down. I mean, we're constantly in a sort of state of decay, if you will. As we get older, we're not regenerating as well, and of course, we're probably losing some sort of information. So I would have much rather cloned myself when I was in my 20s.
That's right. Well, that's where the whole field of taking umbilical cord blood when you're born and storing
Yeah,
that. The whole reason for it
sure,
is that's as close to you as
right.
possible. And actually, your cells, for example, usually only live 3 to 6 days, which means something else has to replace them every three to
Yeah.
six days. So every time you do that, there's chances for
And
mistakes
that
to
and
happen.
is that where
Well,
things
it's
like cancer come along and you get like that?
yeah, that's where cancer. That's one reason why cancer happens the way it is. Like, take for example, carcinogens. So a carcinogen simply just means an oxidizer or something like that that throws a mutation into that
Yeah.
DNA. You do that more and more, the more often that happens, the more mistakes happen, the more likely you're going to have some mistakes. So cancer is just a symptom of getting
Yeah.
old, and it's a symptom of your cells not paying attention or not doing what they're supposed to be doing, and they just grow uncontrollably, and they're not paying attention to the rest of the signals in your
That's
body
crazy.
to stop doing
It's
that.
crazy.
Yeah, that's a good
Yeah,
example.
it's horrible example. But my little dog, she got a melanoma, and it was just
Yeah,
like we took her in. The doctor's like, it's a little thing on her jaw, and he tried to get it out. He goes, "Dad, I don't think I could get it all," and we didn't want to take her jaw out.
yep,
He's like,
yep,
she's probably about 2 months. We're like, no way, this dog's jumping around, fucking, live. Yeah, 2 months later, she's gone. It just,
yep,
but no control, no paying attention to any of the rules that are ingrained in the coding. It's just like growing and just, yeah, it was crazy. But anyway, that's
yep.
not the happy side of this deal. But
No, it's
it's
not.
not. But
But
very interesting though. I mean,
yes,
listen, I mean, I think to me that the complexity is, I was never really good at growing. I'm much more adept with machines. They're very simple, but I mean, we still have the same. If you looked at if I looked at my machines over time, you can see genetic drift, if you will, because we go, oh, change here, change there. Oh, we'll make this easier to do this, and then I could take the machine that I think is the same as the one I built, even a year ago, and you go, it's not quite the same, man. And hopefully we're making good changes and not bad ones. But in the field that you're in, I mean that's the goal is to continuously eliminate the bad opportunities and kind of focus on the good ones. And right?
well, I mean, so for Vern Bioanalytics, we do kind of the both things. So we can use the same ideas to find viruses, for example, like Hopslet enviroid. We have a test to find that. We can use the same principles of DNA and RNA because there are unique traits on that viroid that make it unique. And so we design a test that looks for that. Same kind of concept with
Yeah,
COVID. But you can, and then you just rinse and repeat in terms of that analysis. You try to take the data, take the sequences, try to figure out what makes it unique versus something else. Make sure it doesn't conflict with something that's actually cannabis related or other things that are out
right,
there. Because there's millions of things that are going to be growing, especially if you're growing in
right,
soil. There's millions of different types of bacteria and fungus and all sorts of stuff that's in
right.
there. And so you have to make sure that you get what you want, because otherwise that's where you get a false positive or a false negative because you miss that thing.
Sure.
Same concept can go with the plant itself. Is you're trying to find that association with what you're visually seeing. So what is the blueprint that makes up that what you're visually seeing, and that's the DNA or RNA or some flavor of it.
And
And so that's the world I live in.
yeah, so realistically, I mean, obviously, as you parse and go through data, I mean, there's some kind of actual like visualization point where you have to grow this to see
Oh yeah,
what you,
you can only predict for
right.
so
You have
long.
to actually do some actual growing. So there's some limitations, but is the picture getting clearer? I mean, as you get closer, I mean, as you do deeper into it, is the picture of what things are doing and how they affect, is that becoming clearer, or is it still really just kind of too much information to be? Am I making sense? I mean, I'm trying to ask you is like, are you narrowing in on how to make that leaf bigger, or what section does determine the size of the leaves, or I mean, how close is this to being? Hey, I want plants that are 4 feet tall and they have 28% THC, and that's I guess where I'm going.
So it always it depends on so the standard scientist answer is it depends, because it always is depends on the question you want to ask. So different questions like the ones you're talking about, like the height, the size of the leaf, the THC. In my head, I go, okay, first one is easy, second one is hard, third one is really really hard to figure out. And so it kind of the priority and rank list depends on what is most important for that grower. So and there's also the effect of the idea of, do you really need to know what that pattern represents, or you just need to find that
Sure.
pattern? So one way to approach that is, okay, let's sequence 1,000 plants that grows in, say, Arizona. Find the pattern that grows for those plants there, and just rinse and repeat. We don't necessarily have to understand why
Sure.
it works. We just know this is the
But I mean,
pattern.
we're
But
moving in the direction of understanding why. But and
exactly, and that's
while we're
always
getting there, we can be taking advantage of the fact that we have this broader knowledge, and we can start focusing. So I know we do this with corn, and I know we do it with wheat, and I know we do it with a bunch of crops, probably everything now that we cultivate. Um,
oh yeah, everything.
so it's so monoculture, and it's become so narrow. Um, which I mean, there's people who argue against that, and I've actually looked at wheat allergy, and I don't personally have a wheat allergy, but I do find that I'm probably not as tolerant of it now, and I go, oh well, is that because it's all the same, and it's like every yeast you buy is the same yeast, and the wheat's all the same wheat. So I've gone out and I bought different varietals, like traditional varietals of wheat that have been grown by somebody else, obviously, and ground into flour for me, and
Hmm.
I'll make my pizza dough out of it, and it's got a completely different flavor, and it's very
Hmm.
interesting but I guess what I'm trying to get to is that's where we're headed, right? With cannabis to some extent.
So I would actually suggest that that probably won't happen with cannabis. Is I think it's going to be closer to beer or closer to wine,
Okay.
because those flavors, people really really appreciate
Yeah.
that. Whereas if you cultivated like 20 different versions of flour, it's going to be a little harder to sell that because the flavor isn't as powerful. Yes, there's a
Got it.
difference, but it's not as powerful. Whereas with cannabis, I mean, you can go to any dispensary and you can see the wonderful variation that's
Yeah.
all
Pretty
there.
incredible.
There's such a wide variation of smells, colors, tastes, like anything you name it in terms of in your senses. There's a
So
wide range. So I would say, while I think that we'll get focused on certain traits that people will care about, so there'll be certain things that people will look
sure.
for. But in terms of the different output or the different types of flavors or flour, I think that's going to be a huge selling point. I mean, there's going to be some who want to mass produce it and only make one type, which is where you're going to be maybe you're trying to grow a bunch for biodiesel or
Yeah.
biomass, so you don't necessarily need all those
Right.
terpenes. Versus if you're doing flour, you want all those terpenes, and so you're going to have the diversity there. So, nice thing about cannabis is there's like 100 different uses for it. So I don't think we'll ever get to a monoculture necessarily, but there's going to be
Very
definitely
optimistic.
tailored.
I gotta tell you.
Oh no, it's capitalism is what I would advocate
Yeah.
for, because people are going to appreciate that all those different colors and those different flavors. They're not going to want something just boring. It's not
Yeah.
cannabis.
I mean, there's gonna be a obviously there's gonna be that market that is that's
Right.
growing the I don't want to use the evil empire, but the kind of Monsanto, right? But I mean, how far are we from that? Like, oh well, shit, we designed this cannabis to be bug resistant. We threw in this gene, and now it's not susceptible to spider mites, or this one's completely immune from powdery mildew. I mean, these aren't unrealistic ideas, right?
So some of those are actually already in the market. So it's a catch-22 kind of problem. To make something that's powdery mildew resistant, you need to find out what genes or what mechanism of action that pathogen
Right.
infects in, and then go backwards and figure out, okay, then what plants have that mechanism, and then screen for that, or purposely introduce it. So some of those things are figured out. So for example, powdery mildew is something that is actually has been suggested or identified. It seems to be working, but just like anything in science, you need to validate, and validation
Yeah.
takes years.
Yeah.
So while there is hints, there is a suggestion. Whether or not it will hold up, no matter where you grow in the United States, I would say that's debatable. But
So
that's the
in that
trend.
regard, is there other risk that gets introduced here if you we go, oh look, this is the switch for powdery mildew, and we start popping that switch into other plants. Do we run risks in that regard, like something we're just not prepared for? This plant has three fingered leaves instead of five. It's weird, but I mean, not a big deal. I mean, does that make sense? Like, I don't know. Is there problematic introduction of these kind of things into other species or other strains of plants?
Oh, of course. So there's two different conflicting thoughts there. So you have the thought that, okay, I want to make all plants powdery mildew
Right.
resistant. Okay, therefore I'm going to introduce that trait into all my plants. Well, what happens if there's another mold that comes about that exploits that weakness and then wipes out your entire field? And so that's actually what happened in bananas,
Right.
actually. So bananas or monoculture, there is a really, it's actually a fusarium variant, is actually it. And it's actually wiping out a lot of bananas because of that monoculture. Because it's that you kind of have to think about like the world is a natural selection jungle
Right.
competition. Pathogens, from their perspective, they want to outcompete you as the grower, and they're going to find a way, like
Yeah.
Jurassic Park. They'll find a way.
And they do. And
So
I mean,
life will
I've
find a
been
way.
hearing about the Cavendish banana going away since I've been a kid. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't want my banana to go away because I love that banana.
Yep.
But, um, but yeah, so I mean, obviously there is that risk if you just went straight down one path. Yeah, the diversity obviously gives some sort of protection. Um, right.
So it's a balance, is what I would suggest. So, because on one hand, having consistency allows you as a business owner to predict your
Yeah.
yield, but at the same time, diversity is how you make things pathogen resistant and
Right.
sustainable, because that's how evolution, natural selection, etc.
Right.
works. If something kills half of their crop, that means the other half survive. But if you make everything the exact same, that's going to be 100%, not just
Right.
half.
Those are
And
bad
so,
days.
so it's a balance, and honestly, as time goes on, there'll be more tools so that people can actually make an educated
Right.
decision on what they want to do.
It's
And
fascinating that we're here at this time, and I know when genetics were kind of opened up for patenting, right? And I think that's about the time uh, when Monsanto made their stuff, we started making Roundup Ready seed and stuff like that, and they're patenting that. Of course, there's this huge kind of debate back and forth with who owns what, and if pollen drifts from this field to that field, now you have my genetics, and it's like
that's the fundamental problem of trying to patent
right,
biology, is that biology has a mind of
kind
its
of
own.
right. It has to
So
this point,
it's not like an engineer has a little bit easier framework when it comes to patenting, because that machine's not going to clone
right?
itself
It's not going to go out and make
and
make a.
reproduce.
I mean,
So,
I'm very grateful that it doesn't because I don't know what I'd have out there at this point. But that's pretty interesting. I think there's all this kind of misinformation again about what genetically designed or engineered plants have and what's actually being put into these plants or what's not being put and what does it mean, and because I think the idea was sold years and years ago that we're gonna create super yielding, super drought resistant, super pest resistant plants, and this is gonna. But I mean, the first thing that came out is like, no, they're resistant to a chemical, which is still really cool, but it's not necessarily all the other benefits that you and I were just talking about, which is like being able to hone in on how to make this yield better, or maybe we make this corn more valuable to the human experience, or more valuable this, you know what I mean? I mean, I don't know. It gets to be down to the detail kind of idea about you know engineering a biological
mhm.
entity, and there's so much data. I mean, I don't know if we'll ever get to that point where it's bit by bit. Um, and
Well, I mean, bit by bit is, I mean, the reason why Monsanto did that, for example, is that they needed something that would be pest resistant. Well, I guarantee, well, I never worked for them, and while I never was asked them this, I guarantee you the reason why they went with that chemical is because that's the easier
yeah,
answer. Well, I can't prevent disease across 1,000 plus pathogens or 1,000 different pests, but I can make it resistant to the one chemical that can kill the
yeah,
rest of them. So therefore, let's make it resistant to
let's
just
do
that one
that
thing. It's easier than trying to make 1,000 different varieties that are immune to 1,000 different
for sure.
pathogens.
And
So
it's not always
that's
bad. It's not always a bad. I mean, obviously,
it's a
yeah,
trade off. It's They're trying to solve a problem. I mean, if you ever hear of Monsanto, I know people, they have a bad name, but if you hear to any talk that they give, they always will start off with, Our goal is to double the amount of food that's made because that's the rate that population
Yeah.
is growing. It's like, and they're going to do it any way they
Yeah,
can.
yeah.
And
And
so
somewhere in there, we all
it's a
ultimately are
catch
driven
22.
at some point by profit,
Yeah,
and that's normal. That's
yeah.
not that's not an
Costs a
unnormal
lot of money to
thing,
make
right?
that
You
stuff.
should you should be able to be profitable, and it should be acceptable, and it shouldn't be looked down on just because because you have been. I think there's obviously both sides. You can get really extreme about it on either side of it. Um, I find it fascinating, but we've been doing, like we've been doing genetic, not genetic, but breeding manipulation since forever. Like I have a dog, I want to know what
Oh
she
yeah,
is.
it's faster now.
Yes,
Yeah,
I have this little dog. I want to know what she is. So we're getting her DNA tested. They're gonna
yeah.
hopefully tell me what she is. My son went out and got his DNA test and came back and is like, "Who are you, man? I don't even know where all that comes from." Now I'm curious, but I don't know. I think that's kind of,
It's
it is
fascinating though. I
fascinating.
love it.
Yeah, because
Yeah,
you hear the stories from your family, and it looks like it's pointing that direction, but the DNA is not telling you that. It's telling you like, no, there's all these things that show us these markers here, and you're like, oh, I had no idea that that's
yeah.
what my history looked like. But anyway, so you were just recently in Costa Rica. I think you were down there. Well, when my team was down there, they're really kind of getting on it right now. Costa Rica is really interesting.
Yeah, it was a fun experience. I've been there a couple times now. I had the opportunity to present at the first cannabis conference
Good.
there.
Yeah.
While it's not technically legal yet, but that will change pretty shortly
Yeah, I
here.
think everybody who's running for
Um,
president wants it to be legal. So win.
yeah, well, it's motivation for the
Right.
president to because it is going to help the country
Sure.
astronomically because they have a really nice, rich
Yeah.
environment, and they also could. I mean, just COVID really devastated their whole
Yeah.
economy. And this will help them become more
Well,
resilient
they're
because
an
they
interesting kind of a
find land.
bottleneck, right? They're really in an
Yeah,
interesting place geographically, um, and we look at that opportunity as like, okay, well, it, for us as an American company, it's simple, right? You make machines, you move them you sell them here, here, and here. When you go overseas and you try and get them in other places, you need an entry point, and you need a place where you can kind of go, oh, well, we'll call this home base because this gets us through this set of wickets, and we'll go down, and then we'll be able to communicate and hopefully move our products down further down through that whole area. And so they look like a really good opportunity for us, and we're really excited about it. Good partnerships for us down there. And I'm assuming you have the same kind of thing going on, and the government's very interested in being on board with it, and kind of doing things the right way. So we're excited to be a part of that for sure.
that's exciting. Yeah, it's. I'm excited. I'm hoping that we'll have a second location there and help support the regulatory component of the industry because
How
they needed
right?
everything
You
built.
need everything built.
So,
So by regulatory component, what do you mean?
I mean, think about like in the United States, anytime you want to buy weed or flower or anything, there is a series of testing that has to be done. So, cannabis is a wonderful plant, but it also some of its wonderfulness also causes it to have some difficulty in terms of making sure it's healthy for
Right.
people. So, for example, the food testing industry, they don't have necessarily the same regulations for vaping or smoking isn't the same as your dairy
Right.
products. Because before cannabis came along, you didn't have one plant that was both food, medicine, and recreation all in one
Right.
thing. Another example is cannabis is really awesome in terms of pulling up heavy metals. So if you want to get rid of arsenic in your field, grow cannabis for a couple generations, burn that crop, you have an arsenic-free field. Problem though is that arsenic is in that
Right.
crop, and so if you're not testing, it could be lead. Detroit area, anybody who grows cannabis in that area has a problem
Yeah,
with
well, the
that
water, right? Because of
because
the
of the
water,
liquor
right? The
industry.
water,
So,
they have serious lead
yep,
issues in their water, and so your cannabis is just
exactly.
a little concentrator.
But if you grow
Yeah,
corn, yeah, if you grow corn, it's going to ignore it. You'd have no
really.
idea that that lead was there. Yep. So that's the problem with cannabis. It's wonderful, but at the same time, because it's such a wonderful
Yeah,
plant, there's a lot of things that you have to take into consideration that can be harmful
sure. So
potentially
do you
because of these
see
unique traits.
FDA being the principal kind of overarching kind of authority that's gonna kind of be pushing most of the regulation around cannabis? I mean, right now our laws are so different, like from state to state, they're just everywhere. But I mean, we're gonna
Yep.
go some point. Fed's gonna get involved, and what agency is gonna be the guy? You know, because we're gonna have to all
Well,
report to somebody.
yep, and that's the fundamental challenge there is because the traditional regulation agencies that we have don't have that overlap
Right.
necessarily. And so I think what will I think my prediction is this when it becomes federally legal, the government will still let the each state decide its own rules, and then they'll let an agency like AOAC come in and set the regulation standards. And once they set those standards, and once everybody agrees upon what those standards could be, then the FDA will have like a department or a committee or something like that that will oversee implementation of
Yeah.
everything. Because I kind of see it as people are inherently lazy, and let the states who are already dealing with it let them keep
Right.
dealing with it, and then we'll just have another agency like a regulatory agency who sets those standards, do most of the hard work. Because I mean, it's while it's definitely has a long way to go to make everything more standard. Especially there needs to be more R&D investment in terms of understanding that regulation and consistency. And honestly, one bacteria that infects me in California is the exact same bacteria that's going to affect me in Massachusetts. So why is there different testing regulations on that
Yeah.
pathogen? So that it's those kind of things will need to get tightened up, and they will over time. I just hope it happens before there's somebody gets seriously hurt. Is the
Yeah,
ultimate.
well, I mean,
Um,
and there's the testing of the pathogen testing, but there's also, the broad range of potency testing and terpene,
yeah, that's a
it's
different problem.
completely, it's just like, and everybody's like, oh, THC is the most important thing, and so everybody's like, yeah, I hear guys super drying out their weed to get higher percentages and then rehydrate. Just like, the sooner that we get some kind of control in that environment, the better, I think. But on the other side of it too, I mean, the market is looser now and it's freer now, and there's more room for the cowboy, for people to just kind of still get in and get engaged and find a niche. So there's pluses and minuses to all of it. And when it becomes a very mature
Mhm.
industry, obviously it'll be very similar to any of the other ag products out there, man. It'll just be done at such scale and managed the way that those things are managed. You'll probably always have boutique. I mean, you have microbreweries, um, but they're all managed. I mean, they all have to follow the same set of rules, basic guidelines. I mean, for the most part.
Right. And they should,
Sure.
because ultimately it needs to be
Yeah.
safe. I mean, and that's always the main avocation for why not to use the black market is you don't know
Yeah.
what you get, not just from quality but also just the regulatory.
Right.
While it's in perfect system, it's at least a
Yeah.
test that tells you ballpark of all these
It.
different things.
Right.
Like without it, you are taking some major gamble.
Right. Especially when you
So
have a product that can easily become contaminated.
use so much.
And it's so
Yeah.
heavily used, correct. I think that, it's such an interesting thing. You live in this country and we have such great opportunity. We have such really amazing like cleanliness and there's such structure, right? And you travel overseas and it doesn't exist,
Yeah.
especially when you get outside. I mean, some of Europe is there. Canada's closer, but the United States has all of this. Like they got all their shit in one sock, and you're like, you know, I hate that I have to go to North Las Vegas to get permits to do electrical, to do and you're like, all this regulation, and it's just like heavy, 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 heavy. But the result is that we have such massive ability to be so consistent, and we have all there's so many values that are added by it. Yeah, is it overburdening? Yes. Could it be reduced a little bit? Yes. But without it at all, without the regulation at all, God, you're just, you're flying blind. I mean, this is what happens when with the illicit drug market, the hard drug market, when fentanyl comes in and no one even knows what the fuck fentanyl is, and then people just start falling over, and they're like, sorry,
Yep.
there's no test.
Yeah.
I didn't get
Yeah.
approved.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's yeah.
you know?
The the typical debate is how much I mean, no regulation is not
Yeah,
good. Too much regulation is
yeah,
not good.
yeah,
Where is that middle line is always a matter of debate because
yeah.
you can pick and choose. You can regulate everything all day long, but at what point is enough
Well, yeah, if
enough?
you
And
regulate
so
out people's ability to have liberties and freedoms and kind of explore, then you won't get breakthroughs in things, and you won't get the opportunity to see, the really kind of. I think that's what. This is just a personal opinion of mine, but I think that's what so beautiful about this country. I love this country because of that we have so much freedom to kind of pursue, right? And you have you have ability and freedom, right? We have money. There's plenty of money in this country. We have intelligence. We have kind of the freedom to go and be creative and do things and go, oh, well, what about this? No one ever thought of this. Whereas, when you regulate too much or you restrict too much, then people can't even follow those trains of thought, or they might have that thought, but they have no way of actually exercising that. So you don't get that really accelerated development or the accelerated change, right? And I think that's kind of inhibits the whole growth of humanity in general. And you see it culturally, but you see this culture doing very well. You see, Japan is very well in tech, does very well in technology. Um, and just stereotyping, sorry, but I mean, because of a lot of that is cultural, and the way that their systems are set up. They have the ability to kind of follow these things. We have the ability to do what we do. I think we're very inventive, creative people because of that freedom, and I love that part about it. Um, you know, is it perfect? Hell no, not
well,
even
no,
close.
and sometimes you have to burn a couple of things before you can actually invent anything. Is the
Yeah, yeah,
challenge?
yeah. You have to make a couple mistakes.
Sometimes you get
Yeah,
burned.
you got to make
Yeah.
some mistakes. That is so true. So, what is your
Yeah.
focus then? I mean, you had this. What did you talk about when you went down to Costa Rica?
So we focused on, so the motto of Vern is maximizing your plant growth potential through genetic and pathogen detection. And what I focused on in Costa Rica was more of a basic talk, just explaining like what does that even
Yeah,
mean? Because for most people, I mean, I've been in this world for a couple decades. To me, it's like talking like anything, but for most people, this is not their world they live
nope.
in, and so trying to explain like what does that even mean? Like what is
Yeah,
genetics? Because as a scientist, the word genetics actually means something different to me than it does to the cannabis
right.
market. So
Absolutely.
genetics means something that's inherited, and it references the DNA, whereas genetics in cannabis references things that grow consistently, which is very similar but
Yeah,
different.
yeah,
But for me, it was more just talking about cultivation, what's the different pros and cons, and how you cultivate. Why does those things happen? Like for example, why is cloning even a thing in the cannabis market, and why don't you clone
yeah,
corn? Because we have good genetics, we have
yeah.
good things to do with corn versus cannabis, and so I just went through like how you could do different testing, what testing options are available, just provided just a general overview of all these different what is actual possible. Just because it cannabis gets the stereotype sometimes, just because it has been the black market that there is no tools available, which is very very
Right.
not true. There have been several companies, including ours, that are trying to invent and trying to develop new things.
Yeah.
And not to brag too much, but also just the level of innovation that we do at Vern is astronomically
That's
high.
awesome.
We had one test last February. We're up to
That's
18 now,
great.
and we're going to be expanding. We're adding 2 to 5 every single month. So it's the amount of pain point is we're trying to hit as much as we
Yeah,
can
I when
because
I yeah,
we
that
don't
that
know.
for sure. So I
So
had this years ago. I had this guy who we worked with, and I was trying to get on board with him. He had a little THC level tester, little shake test, right?
mhm,
And it was like a phenylalanine color change testing thing, right? We did
yeah,
detect them. I don't know exactly what it was doing, but it would change color, and it would give you kind of an indication that your cannabis was in this X range. And I was like, at the time, because guys were were really focusing on actual percentages. It wasn't nearly accurate enough. But if I had that now, you could just go, is that hemp or is that cannabis? Oh, that's cannabis.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
You that, and I'm like, I'd be rich right now if I just held on to that little deal. Because the law enforcement still has a hell of a time trying to figure out the difference between the two, um,
Oh yeah.
and they're testing
Well, it
results.
looks the same.
What's that?
So it
It
looks
looks
the
the same,
same.
smells the
So
same. I mean, I work with them both very a lot, so once when you do, you obviously see the differences. But to anybody who just picked up a bag, you'd be like, what? That's not weed. No, that's different kind of weed.
oh yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's funny that you bring that up because that's actually one of our tests that we have that actually does that color reaction depending on male femaleness or other
Really,
things. Because it actually, yeah, it actually what it does in the tube is it finds the target that references that phenotype or that
right?
characteristic, amplifies it until a point that the color will change because of that indication,
Really,
and then you get a yellow if it's male, pink if it's
just
female,
like that.
and things just like that. It's
So,
it's that was our value is that we wanted to or reduce the amount the lab is required for this
sure.
testing space
Right, right, right. Come
because
on. I mean,
it's easy.
it-
Make
yeah,
it
well,
easy.
it's too much, right? I mean, it's too
Yeah.
much, and I think those requirements have to come down. But if you can certify it, test it yourself, the only problem is trusting people to do that shit is, but I mean,
Well, that's why we call it R&D testing,
yeah.
which means it's not regulatory, but it gives you an
Well,
indication
yeah.
of
Wait,
what you
don't
have.
waste your time. Right? Don't waste your time
Exactly.
spending that
That
in
way
the
you can
lab.
test throughout the entire cycle. You don't have to wait to the very end. You want to test throughout the entire
Right,
process
right,
because at the end, it's kind of like taking the test and failing it, but having no recourse to go back and
right,
retake it.
right. Very true.
So,
Yeah, very true. So, like, if you're able to catch a pathogen early, that you can't
yeah,
see, but you caught it, you're like, oh, well,
yeah,
we need to handle that. Maybe there's an option to
yep,
handle it. Very true. I run into guys that grow things differently all over the place. We see, I've seen, I don't know, from the guys that spray the roots with mist and water to the guy to the guys who, it's rock wool to the guys who are just 100% chemical fertilizer, not chemical, synthetic fertilizer, and to the guys that are
more
just,
chemical.
completely 100% bio, and they've got, more bugs and shit in their soil than you can count. And I see all of that stuff, and there's so many variances and stuff like that. Um, are you doing anything in the realm of evaluating any of how people actually do growing? And
Oh yeah, oh, of course, yes, we love that. So it's all. I mean, back to my original point, it's all about inputs and outputs. It's there are for the ones who have the bugs grow in the soil. It's there's when you throw the seeds in the field, there are nutrients that that plant needs, and if there wasn't a way for those plants just to grow naturally, we honestly wouldn't be
right,
here. And so there are pros and cons to doing it in an artificial system. You can have very a lot of control on
right,
that, but you also run the risk of overwhelming the system or burning your plants because you put too much
yeah,
nitrogen in there. But there's also bacteria that can actually digest that nitrogen to make it available for your plant. And so the ones who have all the bugs are exploiting that
yeah,
mechanism because they identified the different bugs, the different organisms, maybe not be them, maybe another company that did
yeah,
that. But they're looking for those different combination that will effectively do that. But then you have the risk of, well, those bacteria will never stop making nitrogen, and there's at some point it's too much. And so there's reasons why all those different growers exist because there's an edge on different
yeah,
areas depending on those. And so yes, we are as involved in the growing process as the growers let us be.
right,
Is the catch-all answer.
yeah, right. So
So,
do you guys sponsor or have your own grow facility, or you just do all of your work with partners, or
right now, it's mainly with partners because we're always trying to do R&D
yeah,
testing as well. So like we are the weird ones that actually purposely culture viruses, and so trying to understand how they
sure,
work, how they infect, and so trying to convince growers to let us do that in their field is usually a
might
little
be a
hard
little
sell.
difficult.
And so it depends. It has to be a certain grower who has the right mindset to make that
Sure,
happen. And so we have a few across the country that allow us to happen. And eventually, we'll probably pursue our own cultivating just because it will go
yeah.
faster. But at the moment, it's not a real dream at the moment. But
I,
it
I've
will
been.
happen. I'm pretty
If you
confident.
guys get serious about it, we should talk about it because we have the same problem. Like I'm an equipment company, and I play by standard normal rules for the most part, except for when it comes to banking, where they want to associate my. Literally a sheet metal shop. Like there's no product in here. We don't grow anything. Blah blah blah. But I have to test. So I have to take my equipment and I have to take it to a partner. And you got to that's now outside of my hands, right? Now it's no longer something I can control. I have to work and integrate my time and process and testing. Well, I just sent a big piece of equipment to California because we just can't do it here yet. So we're taking it to California. They're going to do a day tomorrow. Hopefully they'll use the machine for a couple of months and give us some final numbers, that kind of thing. But the point I'm trying to make is like if I had that myself, that would be great. But then I have to pigeonhole myself into the restrictions around cannabis, right? And for me, that just doesn't make
Yep.
a lot of sense, And I'm like, well, how could I do this? Trying to figure out a way that I could do this, that would be beneficial. So for a while, we thought, well, we'll start another company and we'll do it. We'll just donate everything to veterans, right? That's what they'll do. They'll grow cannabis. We won't be under the restriction of having like the premium best brand because it'll be free. So we can then really just do what we need to with the product as we figure out what the best way of harvesting and managing all the things we do, right? And it sounds like you guys kind of could be in the same boat. Just like I just need a field I can mess with, and if it's still good at the end of the day, we can give it away, or but there's so much cost involved in it and so much regulation around it that it's almost impossible to do. And like, how's a company like me or a company like you supposed to do that? You can't really do it. It's almost impossible, right? I mean, to me, it is. I don't know.
Well, the companies that do it, if you look at their finances, they get several $1 million of investment to make
Yeah,
that happen. That's how they make that
yeah,
possible. We, I mean, without going into our details, we will
yeah.
pursue it. I'm always one that I have multiple irons in the fire trying to figure out different things,
Well, let me know.
because
I'm
it's a new
happy to work
market.
with you on it. The thing is, like, I
Yeah.
mean, generally, if this wasn't cannabis, and I don't know if this is a hard statement, but you would be more eligible for grant money, right? If it was federally legal, you'd be on the front line for grants, which would open that up more
Well,
for you,
they
right?
it's but the challenge with that is you have like three different layers of problems with doing R&D just in general. So, for example, if I were to apply for an R&D marijuana license in Massachusetts, the Cannabis Control Commission has said that all IP I make, the state owns. Well,
No,
no business is going to sign up for that.
not doing that one.
Option number two, I apply for an R&D license from the federal level for marijuana. Well, while they're no longer just the University of Missouri, now there's about 10 other companies, or not 10, I think three or four. But those are very, very big companies that got the deals because, as
Yeah,
they should, they're the ones that can actually
right.
support it. But for someone who's trying to innovate like me, it's hard when you don't have and that's why just having key partnerships with growers is the only way to do it at
Yeah,
the
it
moment.
is. It really is.
You just need to find people who you give them a nice sweetheart deal that if I do this test with you, I'll give you a good deal on it for a period of
Yeah.
time or something like that.
And we do
And that
that
seems to
with
be
our
working for
equipment,
now.
right? I'll put equipment into a
Yeah.
facility, and but then and I'm asking for certain things in return. But you're still at the mercy of another business, and you're still at the mercy of their productivity. I mean, you can't inhibit their ability
Yep.
to do business, and so we find that even in its best forms to be more difficult than we'd like it to be. I find that to be unfortunate personally, and I think it's frustrating. I mean, we have a hemp license. I have a hemp handler's license. I could probably go get a grower's license and grow hemp, but I mean, it's not analogous. I mean, it's a good uh, it's a good visual representation, but absolutely not good enough when it comes to equipment, right? Because there's such a difference in the cannabis between even the best hemp and cannabis is staggeringly different in the way that it works within inside the mechanisms that we create. So anyway, my point is that um, it would be wonderful to be able to do that. And I'd be okay with even destroying it. Like you can come in, you can monitor the shit out of it. I don't care what you do it, and I will burn it and destroy every bit of it. But just let me do it, right? And don't put me under the microscope of, in Vegas, you have to have everybody in your company has to be registered as an adult worker, and you have to have adult worker cards, and you go through the police department, and no, I'm just not going to do that. That doesn't make any sense for what we do. And then when I was in San Diego, remember we started out, and I was like, oh well, if I get my cannabis card, I started looking into that a little bit deeper. Like, well, if you have a cannabis card, you can't own firearms. What? Wait, whoa, 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 what? Time out. I'm not doing that. I like guns. I don't want to give up that right. I didn't know, but that's what I'm saying. Like, why would I have to fucking do? Why would we have to do that when we could just be like, you know what? You want to know? You come in and you can monitor this, and I'll weigh in and I'll weigh out. But just let me learn. Let me do my research because you're not going to get as good a quality research and development out of anybody, right? That's what we do. Like you guys, like they're not going to go get that anywhere else. Like you guys can do that
Oh yeah.
because you're not constrained by the machine that doesn't move. You guys you're young, you're excited, you're energetic, you're wanting to do this. You got all these great ideas. You just want to go, 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 go. That's what we want to do. I'm just like, fuck it, let's do it. Let's make some shit. Let's make it. It doesn't work. Try something else. Let's go. That's it. That's what we want to be involved in, and it's just a big problem for us as far as being able to do it. So I'm assuming that even with the best relationships you have, you're still, you'd still be able to go better, faster, farther if you could do it on your own.
Oh yeah, because I'm willing to wake up in the middle of the night to
Yeah,
check on my plants. My friends or may not be to that
that's right.
motivated.
That's right. Yeah, it becomes a problem.
So I mean,
Anytime you're
you're,
impacting
you're
their flow, yeah,
oh
it's
yeah.
it's an impact.
Well, their business will become before mine
Absolutely.
any day, which
As it
as it
should.
should.
As it should.
That's their responsibility. But at the same time, if I want a good quality experiment to be run under the conditions that I
Yeah.
like, I need to be the one running it because there are certain aspects. Yeah, like a good example of that is we had some shipping problems with one of our products, but we had to actually do the experiment ourselves because there was some shipping constraints that they couldn't replicate. But we knew what the variables are, we knew what the problems
Yeah.
were, and so we had to be the ones that were involved. And it's just the same for anything.
Yeah.
Like no one's gonna know. I mean, if you eliminate the expert in the room on the topic at hand, like if it's your machine, you are
That's
the
it. That's
expert,
right.
so you need to be there.
Right. And
So
that's the thing, you want to be there because like there's so much intricacy as you guys are even more so than we are. I mean, mechanically there's only X, Y, and Z. It's like we're the three axis, you guys are the 10 axis. And we're just like, oh, maybe I make this a little taller and this a little, but the reality is like those are massive impacts. And for our development, um, you know, I tend to get things out as fast as I can, but I mean, our grinder we just got out. It was 5 years, like 5 years. That's like an eternity. That's like almost the whole industry,
oh yeah.
I'm like, God, 5 fucking years we took. And in the life of a lot of other companies, that's not a big deal. But for us, 5 years is a huge amount of time and investment and energy. And in those interstitial spaces, like those little spaces where you're like, oh, okay, this is a great idea. You develop, and then you have to go test and validate, and it's like all this energy. We could have learned this lesson before I got here, but I don't have the opportunity necessarily, And I go, oh, we'll just use hemp. No, it doesn't. It doesn't work like that, man. Hemp does not grind the way that cannabis does. It just doesn't work. And so all the concepts that we were trying to test and work out through using other opportunities and just don't lend to the speed, right? The speed of throughput, the speed of getting data and information back and understanding what you've got your hands on and getting that product ready for market space. And I can't, you guys have to be in the same situation because you're doing the same thing I'm doing. I mean, you're absolutely doing exactly the same thing
Oh,
you're
we
doing.
are. We have the nice benefit that the size of the plant material that we need is not
Yeah,
that big. So we don't need a full stock of the plant to actually do anything for us, which
that's
is
great.
wonderful benefit because I mean, again, we only need the seed. We only need, I mean, and technically, it's not marijuana at
Right.
that point. And
That's
so,
great.
um, so for us, it's we can test things at and then just get the data from the grower on what the final
Yeah.
outcome is because they have the license and we don't, and so we just have to rely on that way and just go visit them that
Interesting.
way. But it would be a lot easier if we could just pop the seed in our backyard or whatever and do it that
Yeah.
way.
I gotta call a guy
Um,
and say, how many pounds are you trimming a day? Oh, 1,000 a
yeah,
day. Do you mind if I
yeah,
run my machine for a couple of days? 3,000 pounds,
yeah,
buddy. You get that look. You're like,
yeah.
eh. I'm like, yeah. And I promise you, it'll be good. I'll pay for it. I don't know. You know, yeah. So it's a different conversation when you're,
Oh yeah, ours is a little bit easier. Like our one of our biggest pain points when we first started is that we did the gender test, and but nobody wants their males, and so we had several growers who told us, yeah, we'll give you our males whenever we find them. Well, by the time we called them, they'd already
yeah,
gotten rid of
yeah.
it,
Don't want anywhere
just
near.
because it's you don't even want it near. Like it popped, I got rid of it. It's like yeah, but I needed
Yeah,
that. It took us months to finally find some males so we could validate our
yeah,
process
yeah.
because of that just that simple fact that people will get rid of it before we
That's
were able.
crazy.
And same thing with the viruses.
So I know you
So
reached out to me on LinkedIn and you asked if we could have a
yeah,
conversation. So what did you want to talk about? Because we talked about all this stuff, but we never got to the point where we actually had just a personal conversation before we got on this call or before we got on.
yeah. This is so my motivation for doing that. It's I talked so we've been in the industry for about a year and a half. From my experience, when it comes to business, it's about who you know is how anything gets
Yeah,
done. And my experience on LinkedIn is I just reach out to people that look
yeah,
interesting and look like have interesting background and they could be of value at some
right.
point, whether us to them or
Sure,
you to
sure.
us, and just have a conversation, just like we're doing here, because you just never know. Like for example, there is one collaboration I had that I met the person 4 years ago because I did the exact same
Yeah,
thing. I've done it throughout my entire career, just because I know that quality people, quality individuals, you'll work together.
yeah,
And any good innovator, any good entrepreneur, any good business who wants to constantly make new stuff, that's how they work. It's always about the
it
people.
is. It is.
Money can be found, equipment can be found, things can be found, but if you don't have the quality people, you won't have the knowledge of the network to
Yeah,
pivot. See, so now I know somebody who deals with grinding and deals with engineering. So if I have a problem, like for example, I want to be able to identify what is the genetic trait for those hard fiber. Well, now I can talk to you about sourcing that material, and then we can figure out how that
right.
works. And so things like that, because as I love the team I work with because we love pain points, we love
Right.
problems, and the only way to find problems is talk to people.
Absolutely.
And
People get. I
so
think for me, one of the biggest challenges is communicating to people who say, "Oh, I got an idea, or want to do this, or want to do that." Is like, well, okay, cool. Uh, Start failing. You know, just start
yeah,
failing, and you'll start figuring it out. And then, like, oh, I can't just be an influencer. I can't just, no, you can't. You're gonna suffer. You're gonna struggle, and you're gonna work, and you're gonna learn pain. You're gonna learn pain and suffering, as you should, and you're gonna embrace it, and you're gonna be like, oh, but there was something in there. That was a fuck. That sucked that we didn't get it right this time. But there's something in there I need. And that's what we always do. We're always looking at that struggle, the pain point, as you said. We're looking at that place and going, there's a challenge in here, and there was something that came out of this moment. And what do we take? Can we take that and use that here? And for us, it's mechanical, so it's a little bit simpler in that respect, but it's still the same concept. You're taking this lesson learned here, and when you start doing something over here, you're like, that fits, and then things start to make them way clearer as they move down the road. And rarely is it bam, done.
oh yeah,
That just doesn't
that's
happen.
research. Yeah, when I was attempting my first PhD, they actually have a class that tells you basically about the success rate of a PhD in research. They literally give you 4 months of just reality check on what you signed up for. And one of those things that one of the comments, and I still say that this isn't just applied to a PhD, it applies to anybody who wants to
Yeah.
invent. 80% of the time you're going to
Yes.
fail. The 80/20 rule still applies to an
Yeah.
invention. 80% of the time your ideas will suck because of factors you did not know about or did not
Yep.
consider. And you just have to, that's why having a PhD doesn't necessarily make you smarter. It just kind of is the flag that says I am a person who loves to butt his head
Yep.
against the wall on a problem for years,
I got a nice big forehead
and
designed for
about it and
banging
be the
against the
expert on that one.
countertop. Yeah, it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
It's absolutely so true. And my uncle was a PhD in physical chemistry, and
Uh huh.
I remember when I was very young when he graduated. I remember when he graduated, and he used to write me letters on the back of his thesis, and I used to flip them over and try and read that shit. Ah, no, God darn it! But that's not part of the story. The point is, like, he got out, and
That's so
yeah,
funny.
and he was just like, he's pretty sure, PhD and PChem, you're going to go into research, right? That's what you do. It's going to be somewhere. Well, he got hired by Hewlett Packard and ended up working on a team with PhDs, like 8 of these guys, all PhDs
Hmm.
on inkjet ink, right? And his side of the inkjet ink equation was full of a bunch of guys that are very educated, is figuring out how to increase the length of color stay. Like
Yeah.
that, they really
Yeah,
have.
it's at the end of the day, it's all
Yeah, they're
chemistry.
like
Yeah.
teams of doctors, you know,
Oh yeah.
working on inkjet ink. I'm like, God, that shit's so expensive. That's why. That's why that shit's so expensive.
Yep. Exactly. Same thing for drug development. Same for anything that's in the R&D
Yeah,
space because nothing against Edison or any of the greats in terms of the science. Science is a lot
yeah,
harder now in terms of innovation because we're standing on the backs of
yes,
giants that have come before us, and so it also means you have to
yeah.
learn what has been done beforehand, and so you can figure out what the problems are
Right,
and
because
eliminate the things that have been tried and
there's
try
such a
something new.
risk. That is such a great statement, and standing on the backs of giants is so important for people to understand. Like, you get born into this time now with so much data and so much information, but you didn't learn it. Like, you have it,
Hmm.
but you didn't suffer. So you kind of, it's a little bit like, well, whatever, a little
Yeah.
nonchalant about it. Like, I think about that. I'm like, the guys who gave you that, the number of things they had to go through to give you what you have that you're standing on, is so valuable, and all that time and energy that was put into gives you that base or body of knowledge is staggering. That's why it is more difficult. I mean, engineering is no different. I mean, everything you could possibly fucking think of has been invented by somebody. You see it on YouTube. You're
Yeah.
like,
Or at
God,
least
you're
have
killing
tried.
me. That was my idea. I swear to God, I came up with it months ago.
Exactly.
But that's it's part of the thing. So you are standing in this. We're standing in a new world in this regard. We have massive access to ability. We have massive access to capital. We have massive access to all these things that we never had before. But we also have this massive barrier. And that's what it is. You're like, so I enjoy it, but I use that term a lot. I really appreciate that term because I think about that in all aspects, especially the more hardened sciences. Chemistry, genetics is newer, so it's not that pile is big, but it's not as big as as the history that stands behind chemistry. So that,
Oh yeah,
yeah,
definitely not. You got hundreds of years
yeah,
of chemists behind
yeah,
you, but and genetics really got it really only became cheap enough for the common person to do it 15 years ago or so
with
when
CRISPR,
oh no, so the history of sequencing and genetics, the it cost about, I think it was, how much was it for the first human genome? No, it's been so long since I had to quote that statistic, but it was a couple hundred
yeah,
million,
that
something
was
like that,
Clinton, right?
for that first genome. And now we can do $100 for a human genome. So just to give you an idea of the difference. So that means that I, as a scientist, can literally sequence my own DNA for $100.
Jeez.
So the access and then also there's a range. Like if we want to do a full genome sequencing on cannabis, it's a couple thousand
Yeah.
bucks. But I can do testing for $10 or so. Like it just there's a wide range of what's possible now, which is why I went actually into the field of
Right.
bioinformatics, is because I saw this 10 years ago and I'm like, crap, there's going to be a lot of data and I have no idea how to do this. And so I better figure this out now rather than 10 years from now
Right.
going, oh, I have no idea what I'm doing. And so that's why I made the transition, is because the volume of
Yeah.
information that can be generated is just
It is.
astronomical, and it's only going to get cheaper. But at the same time, it's getting cheaper. But biology, you are a person. A plant is a fundamentally complicated
Yeah.
thing. Like even sequencing it is not enough. There is a 10 other layers of things I want to be able to
Right.
do, and so if each of those layers costs a couple $100, that's an expensive experiment.
Right.
And
Right.
so, um,
It's really
so
fascinating to me
it's just
that we're. I mean, I remember doing my slides and the onion skin slides in school, and I'm like, and I did a dissection. I remember doing that. That's what really fascinated me. That's when I knew like I was going to be mechanical, right? Because I did a dissection on a muskrat, and it just happened to be caught in the ice at the school I was at. So I was on campus one day, and the science teacher's like, "Hey, look, you guys want to take it apart?" I'm like, "Fuck yeah, we'll take it apart, great." Okay. But that was like this to see the mechanics of the physical of the creature, and how the tendons control the movements and how things are done, and then just to really kind of put that together, um, and understand that. I was just like, oh wow, mechanics. I just like everything has this intricate purpose in this design of this thing, right? And we're the same way, obviously. And what do we have, 200 something bones, and some of them you don't even know why they're there. And no one knows why they're there. They're just there. They break, they hurt really bad, but no one knows what it's doing there. But I mean, there's intricacies. So that's what fascinates me. And anyways, not to go down the rabbit hole on it, but um,
there's lots of rabbit holes in
yeah,
biology.
yeah, but I mean, I don't know. The whole thing for me has been what captivated me and got me interested in the field that I'm pursuing. I mean, I went to IT school. I didn't get a degree. I was in the Navy, and but I've always been a mechanical guy, and I was fortunate enough to find room in this field. To be able to build a multi-million-dollar, multinational company out of it. Very, very blessed to do that. And you guys are doing the same thing at a, I would say, a much more intricate level. And you guys are what, a couple years in now? Or
Well, we're just
just
starting.
starting, yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
but I mean, look at what you've done so far and how many different things you put up. So I mean, it's pretty amazing stuff.
yeah, it's only possible because of the team I
That's
have.
awesome.
Is going back to the people again.
It is.
It's about the
Yeah, it
people
always is.
across the
It,
board,
it always is.
and
It has always been, and it will
yeah,
always be. You know, you can see these,
which
you
is
see
fine.
these
Yeah.
companies that like these apples and stuff like that, and you can always point like there's always one guy that's like the guy, kind of guy, whatever. But this like this confluence of people, right? It was not that one guy. It was the fact that there was two guys or three guys or five guys, people, not guys, not sexist.
It was the
The
right
team,
team. The
right?
right
And
team
and
came
then they,
together
they just
from.
got going, and you see, I'm fascinated by these success stories with these companies that are now behemoths. But if you look at the beginning, because Apple was beginning in my time, Microsoft began in my time. Those are really easy to look at. But if you go back even farther and you see what was happening in electronics, and you see these teams that were built around, they all kind of spawned off of these little, like they were all basically in school one time together, and then they went. And now there's all these massive companies, that are built on all this information that was kind of came out of this spot. And they got the right people together, and the team just gels, and it clicks, and bang, you start creating things at an exponential level. And that's what I enjoy. I enjoy that more than anything else. Is that creative drive and moment where things are clicking and you're failing, but it doesn't feel like it. And you're, because you're learning and you're challenging and you're growing, and that's how it works. You know. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I mean
So
that it's people is what makes this fun, and that's another reason why I love this industry is the diversity of people in the cannabis industry. I would argue is probably one of the most diverse industries, and it'll only get more
I
diverse
hope so.
because of the just the
Yeah.
history of everything. Like It's interesting talking to people who have been in the industry for 20 plus
Yeah.
years and talking to them about how they grew and how they or tried to
Yeah.
grow
Yeah.
in some
Yeah.
cases.
That's what I
And
did. Tried.
um, yeah, and so
Well, I mean, if you
it's
go to the Emerald Triangle, you have third generation cannabis
yeah,
farmers,
yep,
right? Those guys know a lot of
yep.
shit. I mean, they really do, right? Those guys are, it's amazing. Like the science, not science, well, it is science, but I mean, the energy.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's science. It's
Yeah.
observation. It's observation and testing, relearning, try again. It's scientific
Yep.
method
That's
right
it.
there.
In basic
So,
form, man. Just put beautiful, pure application of scientific principle. It's absolutely great.
oh
But I
yeah,
mean, that's to me is amazing as well, right? There's all that. I don't know. I do love the industry as well, and I do love for the most part, the crowd that surrounds it is good. Um, we're seeing consolidation, so that's bringing in people from who don't have a connection. They're money people, which is great. We need those. We do need money people. Please keep coming. Um, but don't change everything. We don't want the whole culture to change. And I think so. There's good and bad with it. Obviously, but and I think last year I don't know, I saw a statistic that I thought was a little alarming. We actually decreased the number of women who are in senior leadership and in cannabis companies over the last year or 2 years, and I think that's unfortunate.
is that because of consolidation? Is that why?
I don't understand. They didn't give you details. They just said the numbers were different,
Yeah,
and I don't know. I don't even know if it said percentages, because that would be that would answer that question a little bit if you knew like the percentage of X Y Z. I think that's
yep.
unfortunate if that's a trend that's going to continue, but because I hate to see the diversity and the culture of it change like that, because I mean, um, it is really interesting that it feels like anybody could be here, you know, like anybody could be, like you would never, like if you go into professional sports, only certain guys going to be there, the top 1%. And that's the same thing with some of these other well-established business places. These are the top cream of the creme de la creme of business people, right? So how do you jump into that? You're born into it, but in cannabis it's still open, and we have opportunities to build companies the way that we think they should be built and do things that we think they should be done, and I think that's cool. you know so
Yep.
how big is your company right now?
Only 5 people.
That's awesome.
5 people plus a few
Yeah.
consultants, but really not that big at the moment. But that should change dramatically this year, is my
Yeah.
prediction. So
Well, it's great, man.
try.
Congratulations. And
Thank
do
you.
you want to put out your contact information? I mean, like your website, and where people can go learn more about what you guys are doing?
Yes. Do we just
Yeah,
verbally
but
say that, or do I?
Marco, we'll get it posted up there too. But
Okay. Yeah. So Vern, as in Jules Verne, bioanalytics.com. And then info at vernbioanalytics.com is the name, is where you can email, and it actually goes to me for
nice.
now. Uh, s- uh, it that's what happens when you're the CEO. You hold
That's
multiple
it.
hats. I'm customer service and
I,
CEO.
I still have info. I still have the info box. I still see that one, so I understand. It
I mean,
doesn't change.
and honestly, I don't know if that will actually ever change that much personally if I can help it,
Yeah,
because talking to customers is one of my favorite things to
yeah,
do. That's where you find the real problems,
yeah.
is how do you like our stuff?
Right.
Like, is it good? Is it bad?
And what
And
challenges are
so,
you facing? So I can
yeah, can we make
make
it
it
better?
better.
Because I have the power to
Yeah,
do
yeah. Maybe I
that.
can
So,
fix that for you. Yeah, that's the part I appreciate as well. I do know that my journey as a CEO went from being the inventor guy and the builder guy to now I do still spend a lot of time in invention, because that's my passion. I love inventing pieces of equipment. So I do spend time there. But aside from that, it just, you just, there's so much going on. We're 50 people, and like I said, multi-million
that's
dollar
awesome.
multinational, and there's just so many things happening, that you can't handle all that information. You can't handle, so you have to compartmentalize it and hand it off. okay, you're gonna be the guy that gets this piece, and you're gonna so then you gotta rely on that team again, and yeah, as you grow, you'll see that pressure a little bit. But if you're passionate about the people, I mean, you can still hold on to the portion of it that I think that drives you. So and I think that's important too, because if I wasn't doing the engineering part, I fuck this, man. I'd probably just leave.
Oh yeah, I will. I mean, I will probably still be CEO slash data science officer for
Yeah.
Vern for the entire company because that's what I love to do. But at the same time, I like doing both
So
things. So
you
I would love to get more people to help.
before
But
we
yeah.
go, um, um, are you guys you guys are getting IP right around your products and stuff like that?
Oh, of
Cool. Yeah.
course. My third co-founder is a patent
Yeah.
attorney. So we have our own in-house
That's
counsel.
great.
So yes, of course we
I
are.
That's the one thing I don't
So,
have is, and I wish I did.
well,
It'd make it a lot easier. I'll tell you that.
let's talk offline. We can maybe help you out if it's
Sure.
possible.
Listen,
But yeah, we keep them pretty busy
yeah,
though.
yeah, 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 I'm
So,
sure. And the listen, I mean, honestly, I appreciate the reach out. I'm glad we had the opportunity to talk. Uh, I'm approachable, obviously, and I am open to have conversations that carry on beyond here, and involve other things. I'm very collaborative. Um, I'm not jealous over the things that I make. I don't like people stealing my stuff. That's why I do IP.
I mean,
But I mean,
besides,
if we're in a collaborative respect, collaboration is a really valuable tool, and I'm happy to be a part of it. So if there's something that you feel like you know we could do or help with, we'd be happy to do it. So keep that in mind.
awesome. And go likewise. I would always prefer to collaborate rather than compete with anybody because we're competing with the world,
Yeah, we
honestly.
are.
But it's better to collaborate
Yeah,
locally versus going against the world in terms of across the board because this while it's definitely segregated at the moment, that is not going to change within the next 5-10 years. It's going to be a global cannabis
yeah.
market, and if you're not ready, the Monsantos of the world are going to come in, and you're going to
Yeah,
be
they're gonna
done.
just wipe it
So,
out, and
so
that's unfortunate. But I feel like if we can keep that, you know, there's a couple of things that'll help us protect us, and that's one is IP, and the other one is connection, right? And
mhm.
because otherwise, yeah, I mean, we're none of us can. Monsanto could swallow the whole industry.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the nice thing about Monsanto, there's lots of ag companies out
Yeah,
there. And it's not going to be
yeah,
just them, but it's also because this plant and this market is so
yeah,
diverse. You're not going to have just Monsanto. You're going to have Budweiser. You're going to have Pfizer. You're going to have all the
yeah,
big everybody.
yeah.
You have to. It's literally the world you're going to be competing with because this plant can be
Right.
useful across the industry. You're going to have
Absolutely.
Ford
Well,
and yeah,
so this is one of the things that people go, oh yeah, well if they just make it legal, I'm like, yeah, hold on, whoa, whoa, whoa. I need a
yeah.
couple more years. We gotta
That's
get a
my
little bit
thoughts.
bigger here.
That's my
Yeah,
philosophy too.
we gotta get ready. Shit, man, they're just gonna come along and go, you know, I want them to do that. I want them to come along and buy. I don't want them to come along and erase. That's
Well, buying is a racing in
it
some
is,
sense,
but at
though.
least you
If it
get
depends on what you do
something
with
out
it.
of it. Maybe. I don't know. Anyway, we'll see.
No, I think there's plenty of pain points in the cannabis industry. That's not going to happen. Like, even if I do get bought out a couple of years from now, I'll make another company because it's
Yeah,
fun.
yeah, it is
So,
fun. Very enjoyable. Listen, it was a pleasure meeting. Thanks for taking the time. Um,
my pleasure. It was a lot
and
of
I
fun.
think we'll reach out for a because we do this. This is all audio, and then we're going to post this video as well. We'll let you know when that
Okay.
happens. But the audio portion will go out on. It's published on all the podcast platforms. But there'll be a little picture, and so we'll reach out to you for a
Okay.
picture of you, and that will have your details about you and the company and how to contact you guys. And so that when they go and they click on the icon of it, they can see that, and that's one way of getting it out there.